I'm gonna continue this dash or helm project. We're kind of rebuilding the helm. When we bought the boat, there was a lot of old equipment in here, a chart plotter, a radar screen, a fish finder over here, and an autopilot system, an old remote for the original Clarion stereo that was in the boat, and but all that equipment was far outdated. In fact, all of it was, or most of it was, from before the boat was built. So somebody bought this boat new and then put used electronics in it. So it was so far outdated that like navionics on your phone or a tablet would do much better than the monochrome GPS plotter that was installed in here. The radar was also monochrome black with green image on it, and the fish finder was just as old as those components. And the stereo was replaced downstairs. I replaced that with an updated unit with Bluetooth, so I didn't need the remote for that old Clarion system. And on the helm here I installed a fusion radio. So far I've taken out all the old equipment, which left big gaping holes in all these components here, and so I measured the shape of each panel, or where I wanted panels, and drew them up in CAD system, printed out templates, cut them with paper and scissors, and test fit them, made modifications, and a couple iterations I had the shape that I wanted to cut. I had to look around at plastic shops for different material to use. So this is acrylic, and I used the matte finish side. The other side, I got a panel here where originally they'd cut it wrong. So there's a glossy side. I don't know if that's showing up on camera or not, but the glossy side, and then the other side is this matte finish. And I prefer the matte finish because it doesn't show dust or fingerprints or scratches. It doesn't scratch easily. On the glossy side, any tiny little scratch from trying to keep it clean and fingerprint free and dust free is going to scratch that surface, and you'll forever be cleaning it. So my preference was for the matte finish. So I've installed these few panels. There's a couple switches to go there yet. I have to secure the bow thruster control there. And right now I'm going to work on wiring a new switch panel and new gauges. So what I did for the switches, this is a whole new panel that I built up, so I got that material cut. Oh, also to cut the material, like I said, I designed it in CAD and had the shapes I wanted, and contacted a sign company that has a CNC router, and I supplied them the material, and they were able to cut all these out of a 2 foot by 4 feet sheet of acrylic, and the cost was just over $100 Canadian for the labor. But it's relatively cheap if you have the tools to be able to design that yourself. The switches themselves, for these ones I could have just transferred them over, and but I wanted to update the look of it. These are old cream ones that we don't like the look of. You can replace just the covers with updated covers, but then these new switches, I bought the new switch body and covers. The new switch body has back lights to light up the text and symbols, and you can get all these customized switch covers, and I got them from a place called New Wire Marine, and I'm sure there's other places that do it, but this seems to be what their forte is to redo helms and dashes. You can have them design and build and cut the panels themselves, but the quote that I got through there was expensive, and I thought I could do it with more control myself and at a cheaper cost. So these all the switches here, I think it was just over, it was right around $400, so it wasn't cheap to update this. But I think it'll update and bring this dash modern. One reason I wanted the symbols and backlights is so that we didn't have to make a custom etched panel or writing on the panel. Everything's just on the switch cover. And in addition to that, I'll be updating the gauges with new gauges I sourced online. The original ones are cream. They mostly work. I think the starboard tack is a little bit sticky. That could be resolved. The sync gauge doesn't work, but all the others seem to work. So I didn't need to replace them, but again, to update the look of the dash for Helm and modernize it, I wanted to get new gauges. So I don't know how these work. I got them through Amazon, but the company sells them on their website through a US website as well. I just found them a little bit cheaper through a retailer on Amazon. And so now is the big task of tackling all the wiring to wire up these gauges and switches. But the new wiring, I have to wire each switch with power and ground for the backlights and connect that to a switch I'm going to mount here, so I can turn on the backlights whenever I want to be able to see all the functions. Right now these words are backlit with little lights, so most of them are broken and don't work, and they're incandescent, but they only light up when you turn your nav lights on. And oftentimes I just want to see where I think the spreader lights are the lights in the arch here, and when I come in the dark I don't know where all these functions are, but if I have backlit switches and a dedicated spot to turn on the backlights, then I'll be able to see all the functions. Okay, so now I'm going to try and cut some of this wiring and remove it from existing switches and transfer to the new ones. The new switches, I have printouts of the pinouts for each type of switch, so I know what function wire goes on what spade connector on the switch. But the old ones I don't know, although there's color coding here, so I'll have to figure out the function of each one based on color coding, and then move it over to the new switches. And one of the more difficult things will be just working with the length of the wires as they are. So I don't want to disconnect all of this unless I label each and every wire before I pull it off the switch. Then I can remove the whole panel and put the other one in its place, but I'd prefer to move a few wires over at a time and confirm that everything works and functioning. So I'll start at one end or the other and see where that takes us. Just start by cutting zip ties and getting a bit of slack in the wiring, and once all done you can replace the zip ties. Keep everything neat. Since these new switches have backlights, it adds 2 more terminals on each switch, so there's not enough room for the old, what they call the piggyback connector. That would normally go on there and allow you to connect a second wire to it. So for these terminals, I just changed that one from a piggyback one because you got 2 terminals right close to it on either side of it that I need to put wires onto. So now I'm changing the piggyback ones to putting 2 wires into just a single spade connector and crimping that down. I think all the wires are transferred over to all of these switches. So remove the old panel. These extra wires are here are for the backlights from the previous one, which I'll have to reconfigure to run the backlights of these switches. So there's a lot of cleanup to do back here, but for now I'm just going to try and tuck it in and see what it looks like and test the switches that are hooked up, which are most of them. I still need to drill new holes and put the mounting screws in to get it in its final position. And these symbols will be lit up when I get the backlights wired up for those. Alright, for the key switches for the two engines, there I made the wrong size hole cutout. I didn't take apart the old dash to measure it, and I got dimensions online which I thought were correct, but apparently weren't. So I'm going to drill these out larger and hopefully not damage this material. So check there's nothing in behind, and just do a nice controlled drill here. This drill size might be just slightly small, but that's all I got, and actually it's a perfect bridge because there's usually two flats on the side, so the diameter is equal to the flats, and I'll have to die grind out the hole at the top of the bottom, but not the sides, just a little bit more to fit the switch in. Jam nut on the back side that you can set to get the right depth. This material is thicker than the previous material, so I'm adjusting it to get this to stick through the right amount. Okay, the remaining step is to wire up the backlights. These wires here are for the old bulbs that sat behind the old dash to shine through the lettering. And I'm not going to need all of that. I'm going to take one power and one ground and feed it to the one switch at the end, and then just daisy chain the power to each one. Many of these already have a ground. That's what these ones are, just jumping from one to the other, so they're all connected. Ran a new power wire from a fuse block in there down to this switch here, which will turn on backlights of the switches, and I had to run that power to the power side of each switch, and then it jumps to every single switch from there on out all the way down. Alright, this is getting pretty involved now, making a mess of the boat, but should go back together and look nice in the end. Right now I'm gonna take all the wires off of these gauges and label them. I've with a label maker, I've printed labels to identify them, and then get the new gauge in there and wire up the new gauges.
this amount of wires, you need to label everything.
Labeling signal wire on each one. Grounds are black. Signal wires depend on the function. Light blue or blue is the lights, and all the purple are the ignition power. So when you turn the key on, every gauge gets power. So the ignitions that are disconnected from there, I'm taping over just in case I key on. I don't want to short anything out. The grounds don't need to be taped over, and the signal wires are just to sender. So, and the new gauges. This is a tach. That's a tachometer. That's the sync gauge we won't have anymore. But these 4 individual gauges for battery, oil pressure, temperature, and did I say battery voltage, fuel, are in a 4-in-1 gauge there if you want to have a look at that. So it probably only needs one ignition and one battery connection or a ground connection on each of those 4-in-1 gauges. So there'll be a lot of extra wires that won't be connected. The gauges I'm removing don't have all the functions for port and starboard in the correct location. So there's 2 temperatures side by side here. So the port temperature with the 4-way gauges, I'll have to move that wire over to this area. And then there's 2 oil pressures here. I'll have to move the starboard oil pressure over to this end. So I'll have to be cutting some zip ties and moving those individual wires from side to side. The new gauges also have connectors on the back, so you're not wiring directly to the gauge. There's these little plugs and harnesses that you wire to, and then the back of the gauges just have plugs to plug in. Black's the signal, which is just connected. Red is power. So ignition power, which will be connecting to the purple wires, and blue is ground, which is going to connect to the black wires in the boat. And then the yellow and orange wires are for the back lights. These gauges have either a yellow or a red backlight choice, so you wire one or the other up depending on what color you want. And I have all these gauges now wired up, and just turn them on. Not many will register much without the engines running, but the fuel and battery gauges are working, and then the backlights also work, which you can't see in the day, but get some images at night. So right now I'm pretty much done. I'm just going to do cleanup with all these wires, put some zip ties on, tidy them up, and especially behind the gauges. So I have new hole locations, so I'm not going to reuse the old hole locations because they were all damaged anyway. So I'll have to position each panel, hold it in place, and then pre-drill slightly smaller than the threads of the screws that I'll use. One other thing to note, this center gauge is a new speedometer, and it uses a GPS antenna to connect with satellites to determine your location and rate of speed based on how quickly your location is changing, and it gives you your course over ground as well. So I'll have to put a hole to pass through this cable from the dash out to where I'm going to mount this GPS antenna, and I haven't figured that out yet. Okay, I got this pretty well tidied up in there. The main harness is tied up and tucked under there. And then just the wires going to the gauges there. The GPS cable I ran through an existing hole that was here for the depth finder, which isn't functioning, so I'll use that for now and have the GPS just sitting on the dash, and long term I may move it. So now I need to position this and secure it in place and then drill pilot holes. I looked at getting black screws, but all the screws that I found were just painted black, and I thought the paint would just flake off from using the driver bit, the screwdriver. So these are just plain stainless steel. Just putting them in loosely, and I'll go and tighten them all once they're all started. Crooked. There was an existing hole there, and I think the bit wandered into it as I started drilling. That may need some repair there.